Welcome to the first episode of the Business of Speed podcast with Steve Breitenstein and Nick Bratton. This is the podcast for coaches and leaders alike, talking about speed development, entrepreneurship, business leadership, and just generally navigating all the different hats you have to wear when you're in this industry, whether it's in the private sector, in the professional sector, or in the college sector. So today, to kick off this first podcast, we thought it best to actually give a little bit of a background of who we are, where we got our experience from the last 25 years, to help you guys kind of connect with us, understand where we're coming from and where we want to go in the future. So Nick, starting off today, you want to give us just a quick little recap of where you've been, your experiences, and where you're at right now?
Absolutely. So I'm originally from the Indianapolis area, born and raised there, went to the University of Indianapolis. I ran track for them. I was a 200, 400 runner. After graduation, I took a job with a hospital organization, IU Health, in Indy, and did sports performance training there. I did that for about 5 years. And then at the end of that fifth year, it actually coincided with the NBA and NFL lockouts. And so I spent a lot of time working with Indianapolis Colts, Indiana Pacers athletes, as well as other individuals that were born and raised in the area but played for other teams. One of the individuals I worked with was Eric Gordon. And at the time, he was playing for the New Orleans Pelicans. And so he and I had worked together for multiple off seasons. Once we basically, as he was preparing to go into that next season, the 2014-2015 season, he asked that I join him on the road. And so it was a good time in my life to do that. My wife and I were getting married. I was looking for something a little bit different. And so that is what prompted me to move down to New Orleans. And I have been here ever since. And so at this point, I run my own business, Bratton Sports Performance, as well as my own consulting business and working with coaches and athletes from really all over the nation. I am also the state director for the NHSSCA, the National High School Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association. And so, I work with coaches all over the state of Louisiana, either helping them to develop a program or like right now with the times that we're in, we are spending a lot of time navigating virtual learning and social distancing and doing training outside of the weight room. And so really it's a resource for strength conditioning coaches in order to just work together and kind of help each other out. So that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. It's a busy path and we all have our own journeys. I know mine kind of started off I thought I was going all in on just being a basketball coach. That was my whole passion. That's what drove me and everything I did. And along the way, kind of got the itch of the weight room actually made an impact on my life and the coaches that were around the weight room. And so in junior college, when I was playing basketball there, started to kind of have a little bit of a feeling that I was going to be drifting more into that sport performance, whether it was in the college setting, the private side, I didn't know, but that was definitely that way I was going to take my professional journey then. And so finish up my degree at UIC, spent my last semester there, interning in their strength and conditioning with every team under the sun that they have in the school. And that led me to my opportunity to intern at TC Boost, which is a speed performance facility, which I didn't really know there was too many of those. I just knew about just general athletic performance facilities. And that was 8 or so years ago. My internship there was unpaid for 3 months. And there were about 9 other coaches ahead of me as far as the hierarchy goes and experience goes. And fast forwarding 8 years, now I serve as the director of coaching at TC Boost, and a small staff that is navigating these COVID situations that we have right now. And it's actually having some of its best months ever, which is really exciting. And along with that role of the director of coaching, working in the high school setting, I serve as a board member for the Illinois branch of the NHSSCA, and doing a lot of work with Jeremy Boone in the past 3 years through Leader Kit, and just kind of helping other coaches navigate their roles as leaders in a variety of settings. It has been more of a passion. And that NHSSCA is really what brought Nick and I together. I remember I was just thinking about it this morning before we jumped on this podcast. The moment was walking down the hallway, heading towards the gym for a presentation. And And Nick yelled out from behind me, he's like, TC Boost, you guys do some good stuff. And I looked around, I was like, who's talking about TC Boost? And he saw my shirt, and that's what sparked our conversation. We connected after a kind of an after hours event that evening, just kind of connect and talk. And then he was on a podcast that I was hosting back then, and we've been in touch ever since. The one thing that we already had worked on together was for Vertimax. We co-wrote an article on just speed development and speed drills that get done. So it seemed like every 6 months or so, something would pull us together to be able to interact or collaborate on something. And it's that interaction together kind of built this connection that we've talked about all these topics and said, you know what, I think it's time we do something a little bit more specific to kind of provide some information for coaches all across the country.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think one of the other things that was also an easy connector for us too was, I think, based on both you and I's work with Austin Carr, of Northwestern University, now with the New Orleans Saints. We had a good idea of what each other's training looked like and programming, and so I think we had a kind of a common platform there. One of the things that I think is so important to hit on that you had talked about a little bit is, one, the number of roles that we've been in, either at our current situations or at previous situations, and how that's kind of leading to us wanting to do this podcast. We have, obviously you had a podcast before. You and I are both avid readers and always looking at continuing education and spending time on listening to podcasts. And one of the things that I thought was important is, just all the different elements that go into what we do on a day-to-day basis. You talk about going through COVID and quarantines right now, and TC Boost having one of the best business, fiscal years that it's had. Same thing going on down here with Bratton Sports Performance. We are having a very strong year amid everything else that's going on. You talk about your work with Jeremy Boone and leadership training and what you and I both have to do as far as leading staffs, leading interns, leading athletes, leading groups. And so, it's one of those things that I know that you and I both have a passion for. Obviously, we have a passion for speed, and that was something that connected us very, very early on. But it would be hard for us to ignore all of the other, hats that we have to wear and all the other responsibilities that we have on a daily basis. And so, one of the things that I think kind of preempted this podcast for both of us was that our passion, although still strong for speed, is becoming strong in these other areas and wanting to help other coaches both young and old, to begin to develop in these areas. Because as this sector of strength conditioning grows, and even for strength conditioning coaches all over the profession, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are extremely important and apply to everybody. And I think that if you are ignoring some of these things, and if you are placing too much focus and emphasis on the day-to-day of strength conditioning, you're going to miss out on a lot of things, and your career could ultimately be hindered by it. And so I think that was one of the things that was important for me when we talked about starting this show.
Yeah, I think with that in mind, it's so helpful for us at the time in our careers to have mentors that can provide a lot of context for so much of the content that we can consume out there. And it seems like it's a general struggle for many coaches, young and older in the profession, that you consume so much content that you just get overwhelmed with information. And to really hear how it's applied in specific situations, how to navigate certain situations, is beyond helpful to bring you up multiple levels so much faster than you would have to if you were just trial and erroring on your own. And that's what excites me about this, for sure, is helping a coach that we had these struggles and tribulations through the years. And if we can help them just bypass one of those from the get-go, and that's exciting for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. So, I think that's obviously gives everybody a little bit of insight into us. One of the things that we want to do with this show is bring you content in a couple of different areas. We will always have some type of training concept that we're going to go over. Today, it is going to be on speed and the importance of speed, and how we implement it with all of our athletes. When we finish up with that idea there, then we will talk about a leadership insight piece and then a business development piece. And so each of our shows will kind of follow that format. So like I said, we'll start out with the training piece here first. And so Steve, you want to take it away?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things in our facilities that's unique to many sport performance facilities is the emphasis on both of our facilities. To just speed is a key part of everything we do day to day to day. Doesn't matter the athlete, it doesn't matter the sport. We're always going to be trying to develop a better ability to just move fast. And that is the idea on its own. It's just, if you're not currently doing some sort of speed training wherever you're at, it is something that is a easy piece that will take your athletic development to the next level. And Nick, I mean, you ran track, so you clearly understand the benefit more than most. But even as a basketball athlete, when I look back at my time in my 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old self, is if I could have leveled up my speed, it takes me to just one level higher as a basketball player with nothing else changing. Just my ability to move faster would definitely level me up. And so when did you feel that it became like a major priority for Brett in sports performance? Was it right away, or did it take you guys a little bit of figuring out who you were?
Well, I think part of it has to do with the evolution of the business. When I was in Indianapolis, I had quite a large track club that I was running. We had 60 or 70 athletes that were competing for the club year round. And so when I had moved to New Orleans, I had really kind of been under the assumption and planned on starting the exact same thing, starting a track club and still having other athletes that were training, but making that the main focus of our business. And, we are, I can speak for TC Boost and BSP, we are one of very few sports performance gyms that have true legitimate tracks in it, not just turf lanes and not just, some type of rubber flooring, but true, we have a Mondo surface track, and that is one, it's not cheap. Those 3 lanes alone cost just about as much as every other piece of flooring in the facility. But it just shows the level of dedication that we had to our track athletes. Now, track, unfortunately, and I think that this is across the nation, but I see it a lot down here. Track is unfortunately not one of those primary sports. There's not a lot of athletes that they only run track. They usually run track and play football, run track and do basketball. There's normally another sport that they're in. And so our business actually ended up pivoting a little bit and focusing on some other athletes. But one thing that I knew was going to be important to me is that everybody did some level of speed training. And one thing that I talked to all of our parents about on our initial evaluation is, no matter your sport, I'll say this to our volleyball parents, to our dance and cheerleading parents, to our basketball parents, your athlete will do speed training at least once per week, every single week. And there are a lot of different pieces that we can go into, and I don't want to dive too deep into it, but we talk about the physiological factors. There is nothing that you can do that's going to be as fast as sprinting. The rate of the contraction of the movement, the rate of eccentric control of the movement, there's nothing else we can do. Even Olympic lifting is not even going to match this. And so, from that standpoint, I think it's truly important. From a balance and stability standpoint, our ability, we've seen with the younger athletes when they're running, the foot collapse to the ground, or the rotation in the hips and the legs as they're going through the movements, that they are struggling with the balance and the control as they go through that movement, as they should, because they're still exploring these new movement patterns. And so we're implementing that. I saw a tweet just yesterday from Eric Cressy, and someone had asked him, what is the best off-season exercise that we can implement with our baseball athletes? And he said, sprinting. Sprinting is the best thing that your baseball players should be doing in the offseason, because one, it naturally improves the range of motion at the hip because we have to explore those, but also it's making those athletes more powerful. It's making them more explosive. We talk about the start of any acceleration. The amount of force that we have to apply into the ground in order to begin to generate that force is somewhere between 3.5 and 5 times our body weight. You know, that there are not many 10, 11, 12-year-old kids that are going to be able to squat 3 times their body weight, but they can do some speed work. They can do some sprinting. And so, you know, there's so much benefit to it, that there's really not a reason in my mind that our athletes shouldn't be doing some level of sprinting. And so,
Yeah.
you know, we knew early on that it was going to be important within our business model. The importance kind of shifted a little bit, but even to this day, you know, every single one of our athletes sprints at least once per week.
Yeah. And I think just a quick clarification on what like sprinting means too is not that you're just running, jogging back, running, jogging back, running, jogging back. The emphasis I have to make with so many of my athletes in that initial evaluation is we'll run a flying 10 as an initial evaluation day and just kind of see how they do it. We have to coach them up how to kind of build speed and then give me a max effort for 10 yards with a certain amount of build in. But then almost all the athletes attempt to jog back. And we talk about just the idea of how much rest do you think you need if you give me a max sprint for 10 yards? And they're like, I don't know, 15 seconds. And I'm like, well, for many of our court sports or field sport athletes, like we'll go on the low end, maybe 45 seconds. But if we have a high level sprinter and we're looking at more of a minute for just 10 yards of giving an all out effort. And that is the part that so many of them are like shocked by that first day is when we're doing true speed work, it's I need you running 93% or better as far as your max effort. I can't have you jogging around at 85% calling that speed work. That's just conditioning. And in order
Right.
for you to be able to do that multiple times, you've got to recover and you've got to just stand there, chill, rest. We're going to talk about some technique. We might implement some sort of drill in between to help correct something that we saw, but you're not going to give a full out effort again for another minute. And then when that minute hits, now you're sprinting as hard as you can again. And we kind of keep that ratio. So if there's a 20-yard sprint, we're giving about 2 minutes of rest. 30 yards, 3 minutes. 40-yard dash, get about 4 minutes of rest before you try one again. And that in and of itself is something that's so different from many facilities where you almost always tend just to just be conditioning after a while where it's, all right, jog back, let's get another one. Let's get another one. Let's get another one. It's difficult to be able to be patient enough to really get true sprinting. And when we were talking about like the intricacies of what a sprint workout looks like, I mean, really the two biggest things are you're either working on your short acceleration or you're working on kind of max velocity, top end speed, or the kind of two things that we kind of call our speed days. And we have our change of direction work as well. But the thing that's so different is you're intentionally working on mechanics and getting a 10 to 20-yard sprint, or you're building up and getting max velocity sprints. And those are what are really important for our athletes.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. You know, and to dig a little deeper on what you guys do at TC Boost, you know, you talk about how you have some of your mechanical work, acceleration work, and then you have your top end speed stuff. What what would be the difference, in the workouts and say, you know, a volleyball player and a true track athlete, or how is their week set up different for those two individuals? You know, we know that they're both going to go through a little bit of speed work, but how are you going to adjust those programs for those two?
I think it's more of the ratios of time spent in each kind of category. We break most of our speed work into your top end speed, your acceleration, and then your change of direction work. And each one of those has multiple categories within it as well, with progressions, regressions, depending on what kind of phase they're in. But if I have a track athlete, I'm proportionally going to spend very little time in that change of direction. They still get a little taste of it for just general athletic ability, but we're going to be spending maybe one day is 10% of the workout is just top end speed. 70% of that one is going to be acceleration work. And then I'm just going to have that last 20% be able to change of direction. But then the other day is going to be my top end speed is going to be maybe 45% of the day, just because it takes so long to recover from. And then acceleration is going to be another 30%. And then change of direction is maybe 15% of that. And that's just how we kind of categorize it just real quickly. But then my volleyball athlete might be the flip flop, where their top end speed exposure is little because there's so many other things that maybe are more beneficial quicker to them on the court. But we always are trying to raise that ceiling of max speed when we talk about speed reserve is if you can run 15 miles an hour right now and the play requires you to move at 15 miles per hour, you're going to be going at max effort. compared to if we get your max speed up to 20 miles per hour and the play requires you go at 15 miles per hour. Now you're more going at about like a 75% effort. And you can do that repeated over and over at 75% without a lot of fatigue. But we have to kind of boost up that ceiling of your speed. And that's why we always value that top end speed component, even for a volleyball athlete who may never move more than 4 steps in a row. Just their neurologically, their CNS will be able to fire at a rate that allows them to make that play much easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the fact that you bring up that speed reserve, because I think that that is, the number one answer when we have coaches that are asking why their multi-directional athletes have to do that speed training, helping them to understand that, as we improve that capacity, that when they have to compete on the field, it's that much easier for them. So that's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. So what are some of the progressions that you guys use in the facility as far as moving your athletes through their speed work? You had talked about they're going to do a fly 10 on their first day. You had talked about they're going to do a little bit of acceleration work, a little bit of top end speed work. But what is the difference between, say, day one and, say, your college athletes who are returning? How do their workouts differ?
Yeah. I think that we always kind of abide by kind of a 12-week periodization is kind of what you plan in your head, is what you'd love to have. And then you really look at what is your athlete giving you as far as the time frame goes. And so if you have that nice full 12 weeks, then we can kind of bring those athletes back almost to that level one. But they don't have to necessarily stay in that phase that my 13-year-old is going to be for 4 weeks. They may be in that for a week and a half, and they're kind of hitting those positions right posturally. That's where a lot of those foundational level one things are at, where it's maybe just straight leg shuffle with like fast leg rhythms. You're going just little small hurdle wicket run throughs that are pretty short spacing on those, just working on that up and over action. Some of the wall drills might be where we're going to be spending a little bit more time with our youths and our younger athletes for a longer period of time to just work on their ability to brace themselves and hold posture. Maybe they're going to be doing a little bit more of like the sled marching activities, just things that allow them to have a little bit more control to really feel postures. Where our more advanced athletes, they may need to just do that for a day, and they kind of figure they're back into the groove a little bit, especially if they've trained for a couple of years. And I'm sure it's the same way in your place. Like, it's some of those athletes that are coming back and forth over and over the years. It's like a day or two to get them back up to where they were when they left. And then you start to see, what do we need to work on to improve? And so many of those college athletes, they come back with some sort of injury they had while they were away. And so it's like, all right, well, we got to go back down to that level one progression. And we're going to work just on the foundational mechanics. But the general idea that we kind of apply in that 12 weeks is your first block of training is really that skill acquisition, where it's a lot of the drills paired with some sort of actual performance, where maybe I'm doing marching for my acceleration work, and I'm going to do some really not high intensity, but falling sprints or just 2-point sprints. Then we're going back to some marching and maybe some skipping, and then we're going to sprint out of it. Just trying to really enforce that pattern of thigh split and putting that force down on the ground. And then that phase 2, we're looking to add a little bit of that more resistance behind those activities, add some strength behind their sprinting. So it's going to be our 1080 resistance, the rockets, really trying to give them an overload feeling where they are now having a skill in that position, but can we add strength to that skill? And then in that phase 3, we tend to operate a little bit more in like a potentiated type sprint action, where we're trying to actually elicit some sort of sprint speed beyond what they thought was possible. Now they have some strength. Now they have the skill. Can we do some things to kind of trick their body into moving a little bit quicker so that their CNS sees that it's possible? And then we try to groove that a little bit. In that third phase, we might also have a little bit more of competition sprint work where they might be racing a little bit more. But that stuff is difficult to implement in that first phase because there's so many things we're thinking about and trying to apply. But that's a quick progression. And then every drill known to man falls into place. How about on your guys' end, Nick? Like, what do you guys do?
So, we, just like you talked about, we're gonna do a lot of building the postures and positions first. And this week coming up is going to be an enjoyable week because we have all of our college guys coming back. And so we're going to see what they looked like over their fall season. And we're going to have to, get rid of some of those bad habits that they picked back up. And so, but what we're going to do is where you guys kind of change your emphasis on speed work and agility work, change the direction. We're going to have separate days. So our first day of the week is always going to be our speed day. And I like doing that because we're coming off of a weekend. We're rested. We're feeling pretty good. And so that Monday, Tuesday is always going to be our speed day. And then later in the week, Wednesday, Thursday will end up being our agility based day, and then Friday, Saturday ends up being more of a reactive type day where we're taking some of the skills that we had already worked on throughout the week and we're applying more reaction to it. So it really comes down to the progression. And so we're always going to start out with that acceleration work first. So similar to what you talked about, going through our wall drills, going through our sled marches and sled sprints, then moving into a lot of our falling starts. And so, I take very much a top-down approach. We start out with a tall falling, athletic falling, going through some kneeling drills, 3-point, 4-point. And so moving through that progression and slowly building the volume as we go. Because, if we're going to set out and do a flying 10, flying 20, but they don't know how to get up to speed, well, it doesn't really matter to me what their max velocity is because they're not going to be able to get there anyway. And so we spend a lot of time doing the acceleration work. Once we've gone through our acceleration drills, and that typically takes us somewhere between 9 and 12 weeks. And I say somewhere between just because all of our athletes move at kind of their own pace. We have a number of guys that they'll come in and they'll move through the first 7 to 8 drills all in 20 minutes because they have it down. They move really, really well. And then we have some younger kids that, they're 15, 18 weeks into the program and we're still working on some, kind of low level acceleration work. And really because they just don't have the strength to hold the position that we're looking for. So we'll go through those acceleration drills, and then we're going to move into more of our resisted speed work. So we'll spend a lot of time on banded sprints. I like to do a sled push sprint. So, we have some high handles that sit about 40 inches up off the ground. And so they can get set up in kind of that staggered acceleration position, put the hands on the handles and really drive hard. And so what we do is we time them over 10 yards and do it for a number of repetitions, the same way we do with our fly 10s. And so we'll go through 3 to 4 weeks of that, and then we'll move into our upright stuff. So we will go through our fly 10s for 3 or 4 weeks. And then we'll spend some time in some upright max velocity type work. And then one thing that I've actually started doing lately, which we've seen a lot of really good success with, is spending a lot of time on deceleration training and almost an overspeed into deceleration work. And we only do this with our older athletes that are able to maintain position really, really well. But we will basically pull them into athletic decelerations, lunge decelerations, lateral decelerations. And really focusing on their ability to control that movement. And so, one of the things that we know is in max velocity, in that upright position, it comes down to our ability to maintain our hip height over the ground. Well, we're only able to do that if we have good eccentric control through the limb when it hits the ground, and that our hips don't drop and we don't collapse as we're moving through it. And so with this deceleration work, we're really focusing on their ability to make that quick eccentric contraction and control it as they drop into, specifically like a lunge deceleration and things like that. And so we tend to implement that. And then as our athletes are moving through, it's kind of this undulation between, okay, let's do some resisted speed work. Let's do some max velocity work. Then let's do some deceleration work. And like I said, we're undulating through those during the off season as we go.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's a really quick overview of what you can do speed wise. I mean, there's so many similarities between our two facilities and the strategies that we implement, but there's also subtle differences, and that always comes down to like what works in your facility, what works with the athletes you have in, what works with the methodology that you kind of believe in, and pairing that together with your strength work. But it's great to just kind of have an overview of what speed training really looks like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure you guys are similar to us in the standpoint that we are always growing and evolving our program too. Like I said, this deceleration work, this is new to us. We didn't do this last year. And so, but based on some of the research that I'm looking at, based on some of the stuff that I'm doing on my own, this is something that I thought we might try. And I'm very upfront with our parents about this. We're always learning. We're always trialing things. We do reevaluations on all of our athletes every 10 weeks. That reevaluation is one, checking to see how our athletes are doing, but two, that's checking to see how we're doing. Is our program working? Because if they don't see results, I can't just naturally say that that's the athlete's fault, that, they're not quote unquote working hard enough. That could be on me, because you and I both know that one program is not going to serve everyone. And so it's trying to figure out, what is best for them. So yeah, we're constantly changing and growing and evolving the program in order to create the best product and model that we can put out there.
I love it. And I'd say one of the things now, as we have some of our athletes coming back, is the exposure, especially in these current times, to different ways that leaders have been able to handle these periods of time for their athletes. I know that some of my athletes are kind of struggling right now. Some have fantastic coaches, mentors that have been a great influence on them. I know that it's conversations that go on all over the country right now is, what are you doing to get through this situation? And one of the topics that we talked about previously was, there's just so many different types of leaders, and there's personalities that fit those types. But I think that a lot of people can find themselves on the continuum of leadership. And I'd love for you, Nick, just kind of share that continuum a little bit. And then we'll just kind of talk about some of the pros and cons of where you're at on that continuum, and what's required of you that day can change sometimes.
Sure. So, there are a number of leadership styles out there. And I think that there are a couple that we run into on a daily basis. And so some of those, come to mind fairly quickly. One of the coaching styles that I feel like I see a lot, especially within strength and conditioning, is more of this dictatorial leader, or more of this dictatorship, where it's, as I say, no questions. All you need to do is understand what I'm asking and do it. And so, we see a lot of that in what we do. And I think a lot of that too comes down to the coach's bravado, the coaches being proud of themselves and what they're able to do, and then we see more of a servant leader style. And so these are coaches that are really leading more by, what they can do for their athletes, or by professionals and business owners, what they can do for their staff, and how they can serve them. Then we see a little bit more of, like a laissez-faire type leader. So individuals who tend to really just, they kind of take a back seat, and they don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. And they're really accepting more information and thought from other individuals. So we kind of have this spectrum between these three. And like I said, there are a number of other ones out there, but where, I think all of them can be beneficial. And I think that there are a number of things that go into account here. One, who's the group that we're working with? Who are the individuals that we're working with? What is their experience? What are their personalities and their attitudes? Two, what are your strengths? So as a leader, how do you feel strongest leading your group? And not that needs to be the only way that you're able to do it, because just like anything else, you should be growing and evolving. However, you need to know, especially in times like these, if you're leading a group or a business or a team and they're looking to you, it's probably best that you're leading in your strongest way, so that you don't feel like you're faltering, and they can't read that you're faltering because you're trying to do something that you are unsure about. And so I think that there are multiple factors that come into play here when it comes to leadership. But like I said, those are a couple that I think we tend to see on a regular basis.
Yeah. I think when you're describing that laissez-faire leader, sometimes people can also use the phrasing they're people pleasers,
Mhm.
where they have a difficult time really making decisions, and they'll lose track of what the company is trying to really accomplish or what the team's goal really is. And in place of that, they just want to make everyone kind of feel happy on their staff or on their team. And oftentimes the negative part of that is that it ends up not making those people happy, is because you're trying so hard to please them that you lose sight. There's distractions everywhere as far as what you're trying to achieve, and then you end up just kind of fluttering, and you're just kind of spinning out there. You're not really achieving anything, and frustration starts to sit in on that end for your staff you're in charge of or the team you're with. And on the other side of it, that dictator side, there's so many opportunities for that person to just connect a little bit more, and they wouldn't have to be such a dictator. Oftentimes it's they're currently leading with that fear component, that if you're not with them you're against them mentality, and it gets stuff done oftentimes, but often it's because they get it done on their own, where they could have actually achieved more if they could have connected with someone else on their staff or collaborated with somebody to work together. And those are some of those drawbacks to those side. What would you say is kind of those positives of that dictator?
Well, so again, I think it comes down to, the group that we're working with. And so there have been a number of times where I'm working with a younger group, and they need more of that instruction. They need more guidance. Especially, it feels like if we are working with high school boys, they tend to take any type of freedom that they can get. And so when we're in more of that kind of dictator role, we give them less of that freedom. And so, it's kind of been my experience that when we're working with those younger groups that need the instruction, that need the guidance, those are the individuals that respond better to it. And not that this is a leadership style that we take all the time. So I
Mhm.
think that two styles that can work well together, if these are two of your strengths, is you have more of this dictatorship style but more of a democratic leadership. And
Mhm.
so if I begin, and I like to begin with more of that dictator style, and establishing the culture, establishing what I expect, and then as the year goes on, begin to shift to more of this democratic style where it's okay, now you guys know the expectations, you know the format of training, you know what I expect. Now I'm going to begin to give you a little more autonomy, a little more choice in what's going on. We're in season. How are you feeling? We have the option of doing this or that. Which would you prefer? And so able to give them a little bit more of, um, uh, I guess, guided freedom, to be able to do, what they feel is best, while knowing that we still have ultimate control over the program and what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I love that you said it was in a leadership style that applies so well to younger athletes that are newer into programs. But I know that a lot of the coaches that I've seen get a lot of publicity or airtime through social media or on video are applying that in the professional setting. They're applying that in the college setting. And I know you mentioned a little bit of that pride component or that bravado about it. One of the phrases that Tony Holler's influenced me a little bit is that so many coaches would rather have an award that says we worked harder than anybody else, rather than to win, have success, and have somebody question if you worked hard enough.
Yes.
And I think that goes a little bit into that pride category of, are you truly understanding your guys that you're trying to lead? And that's that servant is truly understanding what gets them going the best. Are you truly understanding what's going to help you guys achieve your overall goal, your overall mission as a team the best? Or is it your pride that's guiding what's happening, that you feel like this is the best way and the only way, and that's why you're doing what you're doing? And I think that's such an important piece to keep in mind, and we have to always self-evaluate on that. And I know there's a few tests out there that you have really enjoyed and kind of recommend. What are some of those tests that can help with understanding some of your natural tendencies so you're more conscious of those when you actually are in the moment, and you might see that you're slipping into one of those ones?
Right. So I think there are a number of tests, but there's also some information out there that that our listeners can obtain. One, and I see this a lot within hiring and a lot on the business side, is the Myers-Briggs test. And so this is a personality test that I know a number of professionals will use, and so it gives the hiring employer a bit of insight into what motivates these individuals and what their personality type is like, and what type of situations they thrive in, and what type of situations they crumble in. One of the things that has become more popular lately is the Enneagram. And so this is a test that basically assigns a number based on a series of questions that you go through. And that number gives you insight into the type of person that you are. And there are some intricacies in there. It's not just a clear one number. Sometimes you're wing another number. However, it gives you a little bit of insight into, again, your strengths and your weaknesses. It also helps you to understand what other type of Enneagrams you work well with. And so, this isn't something that I spend a lot of time doing in my business, but it is something that I do pay a lot of attention to. What my coaches and what my interns respond well to, what type of environments they do best in. Some of them are very, very good in high pressure. Some are not. Some are very good creatives. Others are not. And so understanding and realizing that. The other thing that I think is really good, and this is a piece that is actually from another strength coach, Brett Bartholomew. And he talked about the personalities of certain types of athletes, and just kind of understanding, what they bring to the table, and again, how they interact well. And what I've realized is that it's not just about the athletes, but it's actually applied to, again, my business, even my home and my personal life, and knowing that we have to adjust. One of the things that my wife and I went through when we were getting ready to get married was The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller, and it talked about love languages, and I think about some of these personality traits the same way. They talk about how some people like to be loved some way and like to love others other ways. It's the same thing with leadership and being able to guide people. I like to be led a certain way, but I also like to lead a different way. And so if we know and understand that, then it helps us, one, to be a better leader, but two, to cultivate better leaders. If I understand that this individual that I am trying to mentor is not the same type of leader that I am, that's fine. We can still get to the same endpoint, but I've got to speak to them in the language that they understand. I have to help them to develop their leadership style and whatever strength it might be.
Yeah. And I love that. And one of the things that I've done with Jeremy Boone over the last couple of years is really dive into his coaching assessment, which again is another test you take, but this one goes beyond the personality side of it, and it talks about what really fuels your decision making. And it's like that next level. I know as a coach, like I had gone through a few of those personality ones to really understand who I was, and going through the assessment, it just was another tool to really understand what was driving my actions day to day. And was I kind of getting in my own way at times because I was so far on one side of the spectrum by what I was trying to achieve. And I think there's just so much valuable information that can be there by just taking the time to learn a little bit more about yourself, to learn a little bit more about the kids that you're guiding, if it's an athlete, and if it's coworkers that you're working with. And it just allows that team to just flow so much better together, for sure.
Right. Absolutely. And before we move on, I don't want to skip over this. That resource that I was talking about from another strength coach, that was Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew. And so if that's something that you guys are interested in, definitely check that out.
I love it. Well, the last part of kind of today's podcast, man, a lot of information going on so far. I've been amped about it. I know that Nick and I both have a passion for developing young coaches on staff. And that is from interns that are in college. I've had interns that are still in high school come by. We consider TC Boost to be a learning facility where we have an open door policy for coaches if they want to come by and just see what we're doing, ask questions. And Nick has great programs for his interns as they make their way through his internship to possibly coaching or going on to whatever their next pursuit is. But Nick, what do we want to talk about today with those young coaches and those interns to really make an impact on that business side?
Yeah, so I think I want to start out this first show with just understanding the importance of having a personal brand. And I know that this is something that a number of individuals talk about, but the problem is, especially within young coaches, we tend to align ourselves and become too affiliated with the larger brand that we are with, whether it's BSP, TC Boost, someone who's with a major NCAA school and being kind of affiliated with that brand. I mean, if you've been to any, and I know we haven't had one in a while, but any conferences or any summits, you'll see it. Everybody walking around with their branded apparel, and that's great. But the problem is, unfortunately, if you leave that place, they'll hire somebody else within the week, and that's it. It's over. And so there's not a whole lot you can do to fall back on that. And so, one of the things that I want to kind of lead off with is the importance of creating a personal brand. Now, this does not have to be as elaborate as some people may think. We don't all have to have our own websites and our own books and our own social media channels. And, it doesn't have to be all of that. However, there should be some piece to it. We've heard before, especially now, when you're applying for a job, the first thing that people are going to do is Google you. I mean, I even do it with all of my interns now. When I have a name come across my desk, and really, I don't even Google them. I go on all the social media platforms, and I'm searching them through the social media platforms. What are you doing? What is out there? And so, again, we talk about leadership styles and playing to your strengths. I think a personal brand is the same way. You play to your strengths. If you are someone who likes to write, great. Go get a free WordPress and start putting a blog out there. If you're someone who likes to do video, then get on a social media platform and do a 30-second video once a week or every other week. If you're someone who likes pictures or you're able to be creative and put different templates together and put different posts together, then great. Do graphics, do something on social media to the point where others are gaining insight from it. But I think it's important to make sure that you have something that you are creating, one, to establish yourself within the profession, but two, and I think that this is the more important piece, is that you are doing something that helps others to see that you are trying to, or you are a subject matter expert within this field. Because we've heard coaches talk about this all the time, and I hear it from Ron McKeefrey, it seems like constantly. He's not looking for someone who is good at what he does. He's looking for someone who's good at what he's not good at. He's looking for someone who is good at speed and agility, someone who knows nutrition, someone who understands a certain type of programming style or periodization style that he doesn't understand. And so, if you're putting that information out there and I'm able to find it, well, it makes it that much easier. As you well know, when people apply for these positions, there are 400 or 500 applications there. And so without me trying to create time for a 15-minute interview with all of those individuals, I'm going to find the information that I can on the front end. And if I can find those posts, or if I can find that WordPress, or I can find the videos that you're putting out, then great. That makes it easier for me. I get to see what your personality is like, and I get to see that you are going after and doing something on your own in order to push yourself ahead, as opposed to just relying on your network.
Yeah. And the timeliness of this conversation is so huge, because I just had a younger coach in the field reach out about a possible employment opportunity, about 6 years along, and resume comes through. And as someone that's seen quite a few resumes over the last 6-7 years, 90% of them look almost the same. Some have more letters, some have just more stops along the way, but overall they look very similar. And the first thing I did is I go right to Instagram and I look that coach up. And I see about 100 posts or so, not really much engagement going on. And so as I went through a conversation with that coach, I was like, hey, I noticed that you really haven't done much on any of the platforms right now. And they told me that, well, they've been kind of focusing on just doing a good job with their clients, and that's how they're getting referrals and more clients. And my response was, yeah, man, that's like the bare minimum. Like if you're not going to do a good job with the clients you have and lead to referrals, like you shouldn't be a coach in the private side. That's what you have to do. And I said, now what do you really want to do? Like long term, what do you see? Like what could you see yourself really big picture that's kind of scary to even talk about? And he told me that he was really influenced by Joe DeFranco, Mike Boyle, and a couple other of the big name brands out there. And I said, well, do you think that's going to happen by you just coaching in the studio and not letting anyone know what you do? And he kind of paused and I said, now, do you think that you have enough experience and knowledge and success that you could help somebody on the other side of this country get better in one of those ways? He said, 100%. I said, so you're selfishly keeping all that information that could be helping somebody because you're not willing to put yourself out there and create yourself as a brand, that you're utilizing something to share information so that person could get better. And his eyes went wide. He's like, man, I never even thought about it like that. I said, yeah, no matter what you're trying to do, like you can, if you're truly saying like, I want to just help people, like then you have a responsibility to get that information out there to people. They're not going to be able to find you if you're just hiding in some nook cranny personal training studio, you know. And likewise, we have a coach on staff that's exploring the college and professional realm, just has a passion to work with those types of athletes. And we had a long discussion about like, well, how do they separate you from all those resumes out there? What's that unique thing that you talked about with Ron McKeefer? Like, what is unique that you're going to bring to the table? I said, like, imagine that you're crushing it in your private side with your brand, and you're going to bring that and level up that college. You're going to level up that pro team social media, the engagement, the way that they're interacting with their athletes. I was like, that's where you separate yourself from 100 other guys that are having their masters, they've interned, they've done a GA position. Like that's what's going to really separate you, is putting some time into that. And it doesn't, I'm not telling you what it has to look like, but you got to put some thought behind that.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and so there's another selfish piece to this as well. I believe that content creation, writing, videos, whatever you decide that it is the best way to synthesize information that you're taking in. You know, we've heard it before that you don't truly understand something till you can explain it to a fifth grader. Well, use these platforms and begin to explain these things. Help them to understand. If you have general population clients, then write something for them and see if they understand it. If you just want to put something out into the public, great, put it out into the public and see what the feedback is. But use it for your own benefit. You know, this is your opportunity to figure out, do you truly understand something or not? And so, you know, it is a great way just to make sure that we're getting the most out of the information that we're consuming, and we're not just reading over it and forgetting it a couple of weeks later.
Yeah. Nick, real quick, like what are some of the major platforms that you've seen coaches creating platforms on right now?
So, you know, I think that obviously one of the most popular right now is going to be Instagram and what people are able to do there. You know, we have the IGTV that we're able to use at this point, and live interactions. And I do love a lot of the graphics that I see. I feel like that is something that goes viral very, very quickly if you're able to create one of those graphics. But, you know, I also know that one of the other pieces that I think tends to get overlooked often is YouTube, and being able to use YouTube and those channels, you know, not just to do certain exercises, but even to do the continuing education content. You know, one thing that our coaches at BSP are doing a lot of right now is, one, filming exercises to get comfortable being on camera. Two, to start doing their continuing education on there and posting videos. And it's not always them just looking at a screen and talking, but, you know, doing voiceovers of some of the pictures and videos that they've done. And this is actually, whether they know this or not, this is actually going to be a really nice segue, especially right now with a lot of the conferences and seminars and things being on Zoom. It makes it easy to begin to start doing some public speaking without actually having to do it at live events. And so,
Yeah.
again, I don't think that there is one thing that's best for everybody. You have to figure out what you are most comfortable with and what you see yourself doing, and start small and begin to build from there. But those are some of the things that I'm seeing currently. And honestly, one of the, I guess, news sources that I'm seeing is TikTok too. And people
Mhm.
putting, short videos up that have, just a quick hit of information, from a speed standpoint, people going through speed drills and just noting what are the good things on this athlete, what are the bad things on this athlete, how are we going to correct it. And so, I think that there is an unlimited amount of platforms that we can use and ways that we can use them. But like I said, it's just starting. Just start with
Yeah.
something and begin to evolve from there.
Yeah, I think it's beyond easy. As, just as quickly as we were off the top of our heads, just discussing all those platforms and the types of things you can do. That's why it's such an important time for every young coach, every young business owner, every young personal trainer. Is you got to be exploring these, and you're going to be able to along the way. You're going to find the one that you vibe with the most. Whether you're a writer, whether you're just great on camera, whether you just like to speak, whether you like the photos, you're going to find what you really enjoy doing as long as you're putting an honest effort consistently. If you try something once and you're like, nah, not for me, like that's not what we're talking about. So you got to put in some time into it. The same way that you've done into training over the years, the same way you've gone through your education over the years. Like at first, it's not going to necessarily be easy, but it will get better and you'll find your groove as to what it is. But you got to be conscious that you've got to be able to leverage yourself. And in this current day and age, it's easier than ever to get information out there. So if you're not doing it, you're doing yourself a disservice. You're setting yourself up to get bypassed by other people. And there's so many great coaches out there that have great information that, like I said, you're selfishly keeping it to yourself by not sharing it with the rest of the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So that is a wrap on our first episode of the Business of Speed. Tons of information that we were able to go through that first day. We're trying to keep it concise for anyone that's listening right now. If you're looking to continue the conversation, by all means, that is the whole point of this podcast. It's not for an information dump. It's just to connect and start that next conversation. Let's find out the content that applies specifically in your situation. Where are you struggling at right now? And how can we leverage some of your strengths to get you to the next level? Nick, how can people, if they're looking to reach out and have a conversation with you, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
So I think we're going to have a number of platforms here. One, we will have both our Instagram and Twitter for the Business of Speed podcast, as well as a website. On that website, that will help send you guys to our information. But for me personally, you can either go to my website, nickbratton.com, last name Brattain. You can follow me on any social media channels. Instagram, it's going to be nick.bratton. And then on Twitter, it's actually Bratton Perf. So any of those channels, you can follow us and what we have going on. And like Steve said, please reach out. Let me know how we can help you guys. Use our 15, 20-year head start on this career and what we've got going on, and to help you guys along, because, I know Steve is the same way. We did this with other professionals. We are just standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us. And so allow us to get you guys that jump start. Steve, what about yourself?
Yeah, if you're looking to see anything I'm doing, Instagram is where I spend most of my energy as far as posts and interaction, at Steve Bstein, but it's the same on Twitter. That's at Steve Bstein. And through those, you'll be able to access my email pretty quickly. You can send me a message at any point. The TC Boost website is dedicated towards the TC Boost facility, if you're looking for information about our facility. But if you're looking to have a conversation with me, reach out directly. And then later on, I'm excited to have kind of that floodgate of information we'll be able to provide on the Business of Speed website, videos, some blogs, links to the podcast. Again, just another place for some information, but that's not the end all be all. It's interacting, it's getting to know people and getting to know their situations.